So I know that we have introduced Kim again, but I'll introduce her. She's our outreach specialist for the Kauai Invasive Species Committee. Kim lives at the foot of the mauna known as Kalalea on Kauai's northeast side along Aliomanu Stream. She's been working in and writing about Hawaii conservation for over 20 years. She works for the Kauai Invasive Species Committee as an outreach specialist and is focused on ohia and rapid ohia death. And so today she will be sharing with us, I believe, about your about the biosanitation training.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. You can feel free to take it away.
Okay. I'm going to share screen. And oh, I did not. I'm going to unshare because I didn't click the video business. Sorry. Start over. A new trick. Share sound optimized for video. Click done. Sharing that screen. You should see my, I'm going to presenter view. Let me know if that pops up.
Yep, looks good.
Thank you, JB. Okay, yeah, so today I'm going to talk about protecting ohia one boot at a time. So in 2018 and 2019 across the state, we conducted the biosanitation training for Hawaii's ecotourism operators. So that is what I'm going to talk about today. It was called Conserving Hawaii's Natural Resources, Best Practices for Tour Operators. And as JB presented a few weeks ago now, I guess it's been, he shared a CGAP survey that Christy Martin had conducted in 2017, in which 92% of Hawaii Island residents had heard of ROD, and across the state, 48% of all residents had heard of ROD. Now, again, that was 2017. I suspect these numbers would be boosted quite a bit higher since during that time we have had ROD detected on other islands, including Kauai, where I live. But what this survey didn't really address was what about visitors to Hawaii and what about specifically tour guides? So in 2018, 2019, these groups of people got together to produce some training that was really focused on Hawaii's land-based ecotour operators. And I like to point out that one of the big supporters, and by that I mean the financial supporter, was Hawaii Tourism. They helped fund this program, which was no small nut, if you will. It was a big boost to the project. We wouldn't have been able to do it without their funding. But I also think it's interesting because Hawaii Tourism understood the impact of ROD on ohia and our forests, and they could relate that to the impact that that might have on tourism in Hawaii. So the training, this was the invitation that went out, Conserving Hawaii's Natural Resources, Best Sanitation Practices for Tour Operators. We had live trainings in person. This was back in the day we did in-person trainings. They were held across the state. Something's happened when I projected this to the screen to where my image has been enlarged, but you should be able to see Hawaii Island with a pin on both sides, Hilo, Kona, Maui, Oahu, and Kauai. We had trainings on all of these locations, and we did them once in 2018, and then we did a follow-up in 2019. And the whole project goes back to something else JB shared a couple of weeks ago, and that is this extension model way of thinking. So, starting, as JB likes to remind us, from what is it we want to have happen? So what on the far right? So starting with the far right and kind of moving backwards. So what do we want? We want healthy forests. We especially want healthy ohia forests. That's the change we want on the ground, or that's what we want to stay the same. And then back that up a step to the point in the middle here. What do we need to see happen in order to ensure that we continue to have a healthy forest? And for this project, that was sanitation and proper biosanitation behavior that people participate in before and after they enter the forest. And whoops. So what do we need to maybe encourage people to change that behavior or adopt that behavior to where they're practicing biosanitation and it just becomes a social norm? You know, it's like you get in your car, you put your seatbelt on, you go out to the beach, you put sunscreen on, or you wear a shirt that prevents getting sunburned. So these are, these are things that have become social norms. And we're hoping that doing things like we talk about in this workshop will become social norms for people across Hawaii. It's just how we do things right here. And then, but what do we have to do? What's the awareness we need to create to get people spurred on, right? To get them to where they will adopt this new behavior and then affect and continue to have healthy forests. And so that awareness, that's the one on the left, is what is ROD. But I would add to that, what is OHIA? Because if we're targeting the ecotourism community and visitors to the islands, they may not even know what OHIA is. So what we did was this, it was about a 2.5 hour to 3.5 hour, basically a half-day workshop. And it had these various components in it. We talked about Hawaii's ecosystem and how it's intimately connected to Hawaii's culture. We also had a component on the impact of Hawaii or invasive species on Hawaii's health, economy, and environment. So this is basically the discussion of what is an invasive species. And we talked about one invasive species happens to be a disease, and that we use our case study or example of rapid ohia death. And then we talked about invasive pests in Hawaii, a whole module based on invasive pests. And we used kind of as a case study the little fire ant. And then our next module was based on seeds and how humans can disperse invasive seeds around the islands. And each island, what was nice was each presentation on each island could be customized to the island. So, what might be the invasive seed that is of concern to each different island. So it could be focused on, say, Miconia or some other invasive plant or seed. And then we had a whole interactive actually segment on the biosanitation methods. What can you do yourself individually and with your guests to help prevent not only the spread of ROD, but invasive species across the board. So in addition to these modules that we put together, this video.
Iola oko, iola mako nei. As you thrive, so we thrive also, is an olelo no eau, or wise Hawaiian saying that captures the role of ohia in Hawaii, covering more than 875,000 acres throughout our islands. Ohia is a native tree integral to our culture and natural resources that provides fresh water for all who live in and visit Hawaii. One of the greatest threats to ohia across the state of Hawaii is a disease called rapid ohia death, or ROD. Before and after walking, hiking, or hunting in our forests, follow these simple steps. Use a brush to remove all seeds and loose dirt or mud from shoe soles and crevices. After brushing, use a 70% rubbing alcohol, either isopropyl or ethyl alcohol, to thoroughly spray at least the shoe soles. Allow the rubbing alcohol to sit for 15 seconds. This process will kill any ROD spores that may have been picked up on your shoes. If we each do our part by following these simple sanitation procedures, we can help to ensure our native ohia forests thrive, along with the many species they support, including us.
So that was a video that was presented and shared with all of our attendees, and it has also been shared on social media. And in putting this presentation together, I realized we haven't shared it recently. So that's something that I will share again, and I invite everybody here who's in attendance to share it as well on social media. Hang on, there we go. There's actually a 30-second version and a 60-second version of that one. So you kind of have your choice. So as well, so our participants at our biosanitation trainings, They got to hear a lot about invasive species in Hawaii, the history of it, what's currently hot buttons, if you will, across each of the different islands. Then they went through, like I mentioned, the hands-on biosanitation training, where we actually got muddy trucks out and JB with a high pressure hose, just giving them the visual instruction on how to go about like hosing down a vehicle. And don't forget the underside of the bumpers and the fenders where mud likes to aggregate. And then before they left, we gave them this action packer, this bin that they could take with them, and it included all these goodies. So there was, back in the day when we had easy access to rubbing alcohol, they got a gallon or even 2 gallons of isopropyl rubbing alcohol. They got a stash of Rapid Ohia Death brochures and frequently asked questions pamphlets. They got hand brushes, a couple hand brushes, and then they got a couple of the small bottles of alcohol with the spray nozzles. They got a stash of stickers that they could give out to their customers or put on their vehicles. And they got this boot scrubber that they could then either put in a permanent location if, say, it was a tour operator that had a check-in point, like it was an ATV tour operator or something like that, or if they were a smaller kind of owner-operated, like only had 1 or 2 employees, and they had a van that they took people in, they could take this boot brush scrubber and apply it or nail it or screw it to a piece of plywood, and then they could just haul it around and pull it out. And lastly, there was this laminated checklist, 2-sided, front and back, and it was basically their reminder of what they should do when it comes to biosanitation for footwear and gear. And they flipped it over, and on the other side it was their reminder and their checklist for vehicles. And it was laminated to where if they wanted, they could use like a grease pencil and actually check off each of the boxes to make sure that they were conducting every phase of the biosanitation protocols. We had 10 workshops that were conducted across the state and over 100 people who attended. Again, we did them in 2018, and then we did a second round in 2019. And as with all things extension, we're really good about doing evaluations at the end, as you can tell from the Mentimeters that we make you guys go through. So there was a whole bunch of questions. I mean, it was not a short evaluation that these attendees were given. And this is some of the results that we saw. I just cherry picked some of the, what I thought more interesting responses. So this was overall, how satisfied are you with the content that was shared at this training? And basically 100% gave a 4 or 5 ranking, with 5 being the highest, meaning very satisfied, and 1 would have been not satisfied. So we really had, at least the trainings that I was involved in here on Kauai, a really engaged group of people who really wanted to know this information. This chart, on the bar on the left shows, would you recommend this training to others? And virtually, 100% said yes, we would. Then we followed up with the question, would you attend this training again to update your biosanitation certification? And like 90% said yes, they would. So now I wanna, you may have heard me mention something about certification in that question. I'm gonna get back to that in a second. But keep that in mind. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. We also asked, how useful will this information be to your business? Because if it's obviously not useful to their business, they're probably not going to, share the information. And we asked that question by module, by training module that we had. So we had Hawaiian ecosystems and culture, invasive species impacts, Rapid Ohia death, pests and little fire ants, invasive plants and micronia, and then the sanitation procedures. And they could give a level of, or an answer from 1 to 5. And as you can see here, all of the answers were in excess of the number 4. So in our opinion, that meant it was super useful. And then we asked the knowledge change question. Whoops, sorry about that. which is basically, what did you know about this module or this topic before? And what did you know at the end of our training? And as you can see here, the darker gray is before, and then the lighter gray is what did they leave with? What was the new increase in knowledge that they left with? And you can see all of these bumped up. The biggest impact was on rapid ohia death. That doesn't surprise me because that is one of our newer invasive diseases here in Hawaii. But again, high numbers. So that is actually one of the reasons why we decided to go ahead. We had extra monies and we went ahead and did it in 2019 again. But we got lots of suggestions too. We had open-ended questions, and I feel these are super important and useful for us when we consider whether we should proceed with this. And if we do proceed to do something like these again, that we do it with these, we take some of these ideas in mind. So for example, some people requested copies of our presentations, and all of our presentations were done on PowerPoint. Because they wanted to share it with staff. So they wanted to be like the trainer and then go back and train their personnel. They also asked for more educational resources. So they liked what they had been provided, but they wanted more. Things such as signage and or laminated sheets that they could use during their tours, and maps of where some of these invasive species might be located. They also, surprising to us, wanted longer sessions to allow for more in-depth discussion. And they also made two really good suggestions. One was that we see if we can have our training combined with the trainings that happens with commercial youth authorization for tour guides, and as well for the Na'alahele commercial trail tour activities. That again, I guess there's a special email list that goes out to the CTTA holders. So that would be another way for us to communicate our trainings that we might have. And lastly, they suggested that we have more flexible training times. So ours trainings were held, either morning or afternoon in the middle of the week. They were suggesting more flexible training times, perhaps even evenings and or weekends. So all good things to keep in mind. I would say we had lots of successes across the state. I'm more familiar with those that happened on Kauai. We had some tour operators and some place-based organizations who actually on their own installed boot brush stations because they believed in the program and the project and wanted to support our efforts so much so. And then we had Kipu Ranch Adventures, who not only installed boot brush stations on their property before they take their tours out, and they do like ATV tours and mountain biking tours on Kauai, where there's lots of mud, that's their big draws. People like to get muddy with them. And they, actually the woman who attended our training, she went back, took all of our materials and went back and did a 2-day training with all of their employees, which were about 35 to 40 different employees, and got them trained up. And for all of their work, not just with the trainings that we did, but with all of their efforts that they do to be sustainable, they actually won the 2019 Sustainable Tour Operator of the Year award from Sustainable Tourism Association of Hawaii. So that was a big win. We were super proud of them. The impact that they have, and so 1 day of training that we provided one person at Kipu Ranch Adventures, they say that this was obviously pre-COVID. So in like 2019, they would potentially reach another 40 to 45,000 visitors that came through annually their organization. So, and there were other tour operators who were sharing similar information like this with us. So theoretically, I mean, you reach one person and you potentially could reach tens of thousands. So I mentioned the certification. So Sustainable Tourism Association of Hawaii puts together a pretty detailed certification program that they offer to ecotourism operators across the state, across Hawaii. And our program has been incorporated, our training has been incorporated into their overall certification process. Now, like most of our tour operators across the state, they've pretty much been on hiatus the past year. And they're looking at, they have an online module where you can do our training. However, they're having some glitches with it. So just like the rest of us, they're sort of, they've been on hiatus, and it's almost like I see the opportunities as we're in kind of like a tourism redo situation, to where I really feel like now is a good time to, in the next few months, say, once these tour operators get operating again and they've hired employees, it might be a good time to reach out to them and do some new training, because they're likely going to have new employees. Some businesses that we've trained have gone out of business. I know of a couple on Kauai. Others have survived, but they need an update, because what's happened, at least with ROD on Kauai, has changed. We have plenty of existing materials that we can just roll out. We have a great program put into place. And Sustainable Tourism Association of Hawaii is updating their website and their training modules. So I feel like this is a program that we've implemented that's had some good success, that we could tweak a little bit to make even better. But I'm certainly interested in rolling it out later this year again. So I am, I will do anything on my outreach, even wear these fun Ohia Love crowns. But if you would like to join me perhaps in rolling this out, if you're interested in talking more about it, I don't think we need, we're not going to have the funding like we had from HTA to put those action packers together. But, there's a lot of knowledge we can share. And I feel like we can do it across the state in conjunction. We can support each other, but we can do it independently too on our islands, and maybe even for specific groups or organizations that we work with. So if you are interested in participating in, say, a revitalized biosanitation training program and want to join me, and I'm sure Amber and Hoku and JB, that's my email address. Feel free to email me, and we'll include you in planning sessions going forward. So with that, I hope I'm doing okay on time. I'm happy to take questions, clarify something that I may have skipped over. How are we doing, Amber?
We are doing good on time. You have some minutes for questions. I didn't see any questions roll through the chat box, but let me just double check. Does anyone have any questions for Kim? Rob mentions that's a great video. He had not seen that one.
See, we have not used it enough. We
Yeah.
need to get that back
You
out
need to
there.
use it, get it
So
back out
I
there.
put a link in the chat for the full 5-minute version, and then we had this other clips. I don't know. It'd be good to have the links to that on our ROD website somehow.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good spot to put it. Yeah, because we started with the 5-minute, and that's what we showed at the biosanitation trainings. And then we had somebody from CTAR do a 30 and a 60-minute that we could use. That was more social media friendly.
Yep.
So that's the one I shared.
From Jeff Bagshow, were the boxes of swag a major driver? How to fund without HTA money? I think people liked it, but really these are companies that they spend more to fund an employee to spend a day or half a day going to a training than the value of the box, right? So I think those were good, but they're icing on the cake, and the cake was the knowledge.
Yeah, definitely great feedback on the knowledge. They loved the action packers. I mean, it was total icing on the cake. And for those larger operators like on Kauai, Kauai ATV, Kipu Ranch Adventures, yeah, that's not a big investment for them. But we definitely had some owner operators, at least here on Kauai, where literally it's them and their van and maybe one other person that probably really appreciated it. But I really do believe we can get by without all of the swag. Yeah. And I also think, I don't think I would like to think of this as it's an ongoing program that we do once or twice a year, because in the tourism industry, you know, employees, there's a constant churn, and with invasive species, we know there's constantly something new to share. So I think we could do these, you know, on a twice a year basis, you know, and maybe one is geared for brand new people who get the whole orientation, and maybe the other one is like a 2-hour module and it's an update. So do you have a list of survey questions you might be able to share? Yeah, Marian, I don't have those at my fingertips, but I'm happy to get you them. I might even be able to pop into the chat while we move into our next discussion. I think I have a copy of the actual physical sheet itself, which I can pop in that chat while we move on to our next presentation if we need to move along. Amber?
And there was a question about behavior change of the participants, and I think the behavior changes them incorporating what we train them in into their daily programs. And again, the follow-up thing, then everybody hit 2020, and you know, some of these companies went out of business, and you know, I mean, we would have had a lot nicer looking follow-up information if 2020 didn't happen.
We actually did a follow-up survey, but honestly, we didn't have a great response to it. I would say we had about a 10% response based on attendees. And of those, though, who responded, everybody, I would say 90% said, yes, they adopted something new from our program into their, you know, either pre-existing biosanitation protocols, or they implemented a brand new one based on our training. So really good feedback. You know, next time, again, because of COVID, I'd like to do what JB talked about in our first week, is like that 6-month later follow-up and then 12-month later follow-up to see, you know, how much are people continuing to do this. And I think by doing that, that's almost like a reminder. You know, the feedback is going to be good, but it's also a reminder to them, like, oh yeah, maybe we forgot to, you know, hose down the van, you know, when it came in last week. Oh, we better remember to put that into our protocols. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kim.